The question is that the motion be agreed to. Call Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It is with mixed emotion that I rise to speak on the Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill. I've campaigned hard over several years, along with my colleagues, to stop loan sharks and to improve regulation of consumer credit as part of what is needed. While Labor is supporting this bill to Select Committee because it does finally at least make some improvements in regulating consumer credit, including third-tier lending or fringe lending or predatory lending, depending on your point of view, where significant harm is being done every day to many vulnerable families, we are appalled by the significant delay in action by the national government. So anger is one of the emotions I feel, and I know this is widely shared, and many people have asked the question, why has the government not prioritised this legislation? It has been clear for over 5 years that the CCCFA needed reviewing and strengthening. Labor in government started a process in 2007, and here we are, late in 2013, finally seeing a bill having its first reading. What can possibly justify this delay, especially in tough economic times that we are experiencing, like those faced by many low and middle income New Zealanders under this national government? What can possibly justify this delay? In tough economic times, harm caused by predatory lenders, loan sharks, truck shops, payday lenders is huge and has grown significantly. Families struggle to make ends meet with low or static incomes and rising prices. Unemployment remains high. This is fertile grounds for unscrupulous lenders, and we need to have some action. I've visited budget services around New Zealand, and they've told me overwhelmingly that the people they see are hooked into some form of high-interest debt. They say that it's been getting worse over recent years. They tell me the level of debt is higher. They tell me that the complexity of the financial problems that they are trying to sort is greater, and that the proportion of people they see who are in paid work has actually increased. Now, members of the community and our community organisations, our CABs, our law centres, MPs, I'm sure from both sides of the House, hear these stories, and they see the truck shops rattling around the low-income areas in their communities. They see the targeting of our poorer communities by these lenders. They see too the advertisements online and in our community newspapers, and they do not like what they see. They know it's wrong, and yet National has sat on their hands for 5 years. This is a government that is out of touch. And it's not like there haven't been opportunities to do something. And I think it's about what the government actually prioritises. That's why we have waited so long for this legislation. And during that time, vulnerable families have been harmed by unscrupulous lenders. So this government, when they came into power, there was already a review of the CCCFA underway. In 2009, my former colleague, Charles Chauvel, had a members' bill drawn out of a ballot. I picked up that bill and launched the Stop Loan Shark campaign, which led to a huge outpouring of support for change. In July 2010, my members' bill was voted down by National and ACT MPs. I subsequently tried to get a joint referral to a select committee and said, let's work on this collaboratively, let's do something about this problem. But again, that was turned down by members opposite. And this is despite the fact that members opposite know the extent of the problem. And in a cabinet paper from October 2011, it specifically says, unlike what the Minister have just said, that the CCCFA wasn't working well, actually. The law is not providing adequate consumer protections against unscrupulous third-tier lenders whose irresponsible lending practices are resulting in severe financial hardship and spiralling debt. Now, that's pretty clear. So the government knew there was a problem, but despite that, failed to prioritise this work. And I think that's negligent, actually, and it has caused serious harm to many, many families. The harm caused by predatory and unscrupulous lenders obviously hurts the individuals concerned, but it also hurts their families. And the regulatory impact statement from 2011 talks about debt resulting in a huge toll emotionally and practically on families. They talk about difficulties in meeting other costs, food, transportation and health needs, difficulty in engaging in activities that would normally be considered things that families would do, negative impacts on mental well-being, negative impacts on relationships. These are all things that were stated as a consequence of this sort of lending. In a recent article, yesterday in fact, the article was "When Rising Debt Becomes a Black Dog," it identifies the cycle of debt and says that it's one of the biggest root causes of violence and notes that negative impact on mental health. So I just want to acknowledge, and I know members opposite would agree with this, that legislative change is not the only answer to this problem. It's also, from our side of the House, it's about addressing low incomes. It's also about things like housing affordability, which of course this government is completely out of touch with, as many have already noted today. And in fact, the recent changes to LVRs is probably going to push some people into the arms of loan sharks, ironically. It's also about financial literacy. It's also about access to fair credit, and Labor has already announced that we would put in place a social lending scheme to provide access to credit for low-income people when they need it. But legislation is nonetheless a vital first step, and there are a number of very positive provisions in this bill, and I want to acknowledge that. It's certainly the provision around responsible lending. That principle is an important one, and one, in fact, it was in my member's bill. It will include things like advertising. It will require making of reasonable inquiries as to the ability of a person to repay a loan. One that I'm pleased to see is about assisting guarantors in making informed decisions. So this code, though, has to be developed. The calling off period is extended. That's a good thing as well. And as is the fact that unreasonable fees, there will be more explicit tests for different kinds of fees, and there are numerous fees that many of these lenders charge. I also want to note particularly the repossession provisions that the Minister has commented on. This is very timely. There is absolutely a need to do that work, and I would also like to acknowledge the work of the Law Commission in dealing with reviewing the repossession situation. And that includes licensing of repossession agents. So one of the other things that's in here is around hardship provisions being accessible once a person has actually got into default. That's something that budget services have been asking for a very long time, and I'm very pleased to see that here as well. So there are many good provisions in this bill, but there are a number of concerns that we have as well. First of all, and fundamentally, a failure to address excessive interest rates. And one prominent payday lender in New Zealand has annual rates of 500%, meaning that a loan can very, very quickly spiral out of control. In other jurisdictions, controls are becoming more and more common. France, Germany, Canada, Mexico, South Africa, Japan, Singapore, much of the USA, and in fact a bill's just been introduced which will extend interest rate caps across all states, Australia, the United Kingdom and almost all of South America. Now, the Minister, Craig Foss, has encouraged the members of the public to submit on this matter, and I would certainly do the same, and I sincerely hope that national members of the Select Committee will actually take account of what they are saying about this matter. There are other provisions we are concerned about, whether the dodgy practices of the burgeoning number of truck shops and payday lenders, whether they will be sufficiently covered by this legislation, whether we need to include provisions around fair debt collection practices to prevent harassment and bullying is another area I think we could profitably look at in the Select Committee. So we will be encouraging people to submit, and the members of the Select Committee will be closely scrutinising this bill. As I said, we have supported it to Select Committee where we will be doing that. I want to close where I started by saying, why did the National Government decide that the regulation of loan sharks, truck shops, payday lenders and the like who lend irresponsibly and charge excessive interest rates, why wasn't that a priority?
I call Jonathan Young.